Hi, third grade friends. Today I will teach you our fourth capacity and weight lesson. However, today our focus will be only on measuring weight using the metric system. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to determine the most appropriate metric unit to use to measure the weight of different objects. And the two units that we will focus on today are grams and kilograms. As always, sweet friends, please make sure that you have a pencil, a scratch piece of paper to write on or a notebook, and a district math packet so that you can participate in this entire lesson with me. So as always, we will begin by reviewing what we already know and what we learned about yesterday. Let's start by just remembering what is weight and how do we measure weight. Were you able to remember, third graders, that when we talk about weight, we're talking about how hard gravity is pulling on an object. It's different than mass because mass is the amount of matter or stuff an object is made up of. But weight is just how hard gravity pulls on an object. And we also know, third graders, that the heavier an object is, the more force we have to use to be able to lift the object. But lighter objects require less force to pick up or move. So think about picking up a big stack of books and picking up a handful of paper clips. You know that we would have to work harder to lift a big stack of books because gravity is pulling harder on that big stack of books than it is on those paper clips. We measure weight using standard units, just like we measure length and capacity using standard units. We know that there are two systems that we use to measure an object's weight. We use the customary system that we learned about yesterday. And we also sometimes use the metric system that we're going to learn all about today. So as I mentioned, third graders, yesterday we learned all about customary units that we use to measure weight. I'm going to give you one of them, ounces. We know that ounces are used to measure very light objects that aren't very heavy, such as a small screw. Could you please write down all three of the customary units that we use to measure weight? Who was able to remember all three of these units? Fantastic! Yes, you know that you measure the weight of light objects using ounces. We use pounds to actually measure the weight of most objects that are medium or even heavy. We use tons to measure very, very, very heavy objects that we could never pick up, like a truck or a house or a helicopter. I have one more challenge for you, third graders. Could you write down how many ounces there are in a pound and how many pounds there are in a ton? Write it on your paper. Fantastic. You are exactly right. There are 16 ounces in a pound. There are 2,000 pounds in a ton. Awesome, awesome job. You know that very light objects, we use ounces to measure the weight of those. Most objects in our daily life, we use pounds to measure the weight, such as humans. When we go to the doctor, we're measured in pounds, or animals, or furniture, or most of your books for school, or your backpack, or your desk. Those are all measured in pounds. Tons are used to measure very heavy objects. Any objects that weigh more than a car, we would use tons to measure because there are 2,000 pounds in a ton. Sit up really straight because now we're going to focus on our new learning for today. Our new learning for today is all about how we weigh objects using metric units. So what are the two metric units that we use to measure weight? There are only two, so it's pretty simple to remember. There are grams and kilograms. Say that with me, grams and kilograms. So let's start with grams. A gram is what we use to measure very light objects. So only one grape weighs about a gram. It's very, very light. A paperclip or a thumbtack also weighs about a gram. Fantastic listening. A kilogram is made up of 1,000 grams. For your reference, a cantaloupe weighs about a kilogram. A pineapple also weighs about a kilogram. And 2 loaves of bread also weighs about a kilogram. So we weigh very light objects using grams. Any object that weighs more than a cantaloupe or pineapple, we use kilograms to weigh, because kilograms are equal to 1,000 grams. So most daily objects that you would think of are measured in kilograms. Light objects that weigh less than a cantaloupe are measured in grams. On your paper, would you please write down what weighs about a gram? Please also write down how many grams equal 1 kilogram. Fantastic. We know 1,000 grams is equal to 1 kilogram. Here is your task that you will get to do with me. And I'm going to tell you it's just like the task that we have been doing together. However, today we get to use our metric units to determine which unit would be most appropriate to measure items that we see in our daily life. So you get to look at each of these objects with me. I'm going to grab my highlighter so we can do some work together. You get to look at these objects with me and you get to decide which would be the most appropriate unit to use to measure the weight of the object on this screen and why. So our 2 options are grams. Would we weigh this object in grams? Or would we weigh this object in kilograms? And here is a reference in case you forget. You also have a vocabulary sheet right in your packet that you could reference. So I always think to myself, if the object weighs more than a pineapple or cantaloupe, then I would definitely use kilograms. If it weighs less than a pineapple or cantaloupe, I would use grams. Before we get started on this assignment, I want you guys to look one more time, a little bit deeper, at which objects would be measured with which unit. So I know that I use grams to measure very light objects. You might have some of these objects around your house. If you do, get it out and put it in your hand so you can see about the amount that it weighs. So 3rd graders, I know that very light objects are measured using grams. Each of the objects on my screen that you see right now weigh about a gram. 1 paperclip weighs about a gram. As you know, 1 grape weighs about a gram. 1 thumbtack weighs about a gram. Only the cap to your pen weighs about a gram. A dollar bill weighs about a gram. And just 1 stick of gum weighs about a gram. Not the entire pack, just 1 stick. So we measure very light everyday objects in grams. We use grams to measure the weight of any object weighing less than 1 kilogram. I always think to myself, if it weighs less than a pineapple or 2 loaves of bread, I know I would use grams to weigh the object. If it weighs more, I would use kilograms. So a quarter that your mom or dad or grandma might have in their purse, boys and girls, you would use grams to measure the weight of a quarter. And the reason for that is because a quarter is about 6 grams. It weighs about 6 grams. We would measure an iPhone using grams because it's less than 1 kilogram. Or an apple, which actually weighs about 100 grams. Or a granola bar, which weighs about 50 grams. A small paperback book. or a cheeseburger. Those are objects that don't weigh very much, so we would use grams to weigh them. We would use kilograms to measure medium to heavy everyday objects. So these below are some objects that weigh about a kilogram. A pineapple weighs about a kilogram. A liter of water would weigh a kilogram. The entire bag of sugar would weigh a kilogram. The Chromebook that you're using right now or a small laptop would weigh about a kilogram. So if you're using one, pick it up. That's about how much a kilogram weighs. And 2 loaves of bread weigh about a kilogram. So you would use kilograms to measure the weight of most things in daily lives. So we weigh medium to heavy objects using kilograms. Any everyday object that weighs more than a liter of water, that weighs more than this bottle of water, is measured in kilograms. So like the desk that you're doing work on right now, or your kitchen table, a car, a backpack, a microwave, any furniture. So anything that's a medium weight to a heavy weight, you would use kilograms to measure. I've already introduced this page to you. So let's use what we know about measuring objects using metric units to decide which would be the most appropriate unit to measure the objects on my screen. Is it a very light object? Would I use grams? Or is it a medium weight or heavyweight object? Would I use kilograms? Good thing I have my highlighter available. So a bike, let's start with a bike. Would we use grams to measure the weight of a bike or kilograms? Let's think to ourselves. Does a bike weigh more or less than a cantaloupe or pineapple? You're right, it weighs more. So on your paper, would you write down that if you were measuring the weight of a bike, you would use kilograms because it would weigh more than a pineapple or a liter of water. And so I know I would need to choose the heavier unit of measure. What about a dandelion that you could blow on to make a wish outside? Let's see. Does a dandelion weigh less or more than a kilogram? Does it weigh less than a melon or a pineapple? Absolutely. A dandelion is very, very light. I can pick it up and I barely even feel the weight in my hands. So which would be the most appropriate metric unit and why? Write it down, please. Yes, on your paper, I hope you wrote down that you would use grams to measure the weight of a dandelion. What about a desk? Well, I always ask myself, does it weigh more than a kilogram? Does it weigh more than a melon or pineapple? Well, yes. So I would have to use kilograms to measure a desk. You guys are so good at this. Thank you. Ooh, what about a mini bubble container that's only about 2 or 3 inches with just a little bit of bubbles in there? Would that weigh less than a liter of water or less than a pineapple or cantaloupe or more? Write down which metric unit you would use to measure the weight of a small container of bubbles. What did you say? Definitely grams. A mini container of bubbles would weigh less than a melon or a pineapple, so I knew I would use grams. This is a fun one. What about a banana? If you have a banana in your house, get it out and put it in your hands. What would you use to measure the weight of a banana? Would you use grams or kilograms? Does it weigh less than a pineapple or a liter of water or more? You guys are right. It weighs less than a melon or pineapple. So I know right away I would measure bananas in grams. You guys are really getting the hang of this. Do this one by yourself. Write helicopter on your paper and write either a G for grams to use to measure the weight or kg for kilograms to use to measure the weight of a helicopter. You're exactly right. Of course you would use kilograms because a helicopter weighs a lot more. I'm going to draw an arrow. It weighs a lot more than a melon, a cantaloupe, or a pineapple. So I know I would have to use kilograms for anything that weighs more than a pineapple. What about a goldfish? Write it on your paper and put either G or kg to select the appropriate unit you would use to measure the weight of a goldfish. Absolutely wonderful. Kilograms, because it weighs less than a cantaloupe. And so I know it's a very light object, and I would use grams to measure the weight of a goldfish. Fantastic listening. Okay, sweet peas, here is your assignment for today. After you watch my video very carefully, I'm going to list different objects, and you're going to say whether you would use grams or kilograms to measure the weight of the listed objects. Please explain your thinking. It can be as little as just saying, well, it weighs more than a melon, or it weighs more than 100 or 1,000 kilograms, so I know I would use kilograms. So please do your very, very best and take your time. I know that a lawnmower weighs more than a melon or pineapple, and so I would use kilograms to measure the weight of a lawnmower. Let's do one more together. What about a robin's egg? So a robin's egg I know is very, very small. So I know that it would weigh much less than 1,000 grams, much less than a kilogram. So I know I would use grams. What could I say for my explanation? Wonderful. You could say a robin's egg is very, very light. It weighs less than 1,000 grams. So I would use grams to measure the weight of a robin's egg. I am very impressed with your listening, third graders, and I simply cannot wait to see your assignment today. Thank you for your fantastic work.